Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Couple of Nukes. As always, I'm your host, Mr. Whiskey, and today we are here with Logan, not quite the one played by Hugh Jackman, just as muscular and good looking, just no flaws. I'm gonna be the Deadpool for the day if he's Logan, so call
Okay.
me Mr. Wade Whiskey. But yeah, we're here with Logan. We're going to get into an interesting conversation topic, one that some people don't like to touch, but a religious cult. We're going to start there and then get into the military. And y'all who listen to the show frequently know that that's a big topic on the show. We get into military mental health, addiction, suicide, and unfortunately, a lot of service members experience one, if not all of those. So, if it's not the mental health issues, it's, the suicidal ideation, it's the addiction, or sometimes, you get out and you have a great civilian life, but that's not often the case. Unfortunately, we have many suicides every day, both veteran and active duty. So we're going to get into our guest's life today to cultivate some life lessons and advice for healing, as well as go over what he does today. So, Mr. Logan, great to have you here. And could you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Appreciate you, Mr. Whiskey, and your audience, everyone. Appreciate what you're doing, the good work that's helping people, change their lives and really bring attention to this that, not a lot of people are talking about, unfortunately. As you mentioned, had a hell of a journey. I grew up on the south side of Chicago, pretty poor. I had everything we needed, but, not a lot of the extras. To a single mother who struggled with mental illness. She was bipolar. And so as a kid, like, you don't really understand how to navigate that. You're just like,
Yeah.
okay, how can I keep you happy so I can be happy and go play? you know?
Right, right.
But we also grew up in a religious cult. And what that meant for little Logan was that due to my mom's religious beliefs, like I wasn't allowed to eat chocolate, allowed to watch cartoons as a kid. I wasn't allowed to play in gym class or go to recess in some cases. We couldn't play sports. We also couldn't celebrate holidays. So
Mm.
growing up, it felt like every step of the way, I was just ostracized from my friends. I was just different from my classmates. And, when you're kids, they'll find any reason to tease somebody. And
For
it just,
sure.
yeah, not celebrating birthdays, not celebrating, Valentine's Day or Easter, any of that stuff. Like not being able to go play at gym class. It was really tough. And as a result, by the time I was in high school, I was suicidal. And it wasn't because like I wanted the newest shoes or the newest clothes or something like that. I just was tired of being different from everybody. And I just wanted that pain to end for me. I remember walking out of church one Friday night and standing at the edge of the street, looking at the train or looking at there was an oncoming truck and thinking it wouldn't be so bad if that just killed me and ended all the pain. And that was a pretty tough place to be, but I got through it and I ended up running away and joining the Air Force. And there, 26-year-old Logan found himself in Iraq and, not having completely dealt with all the childhood cult issues, I was now dealing with, feeling my life, my mortality every day, multiple times a day, because at that particular base, Joint Base Balad, we were getting attacked 7 to 8 times a day with small arms fire, with mortars, artillery, those types of things. So morning, noon, night, you're waking up with the alarm klaxon saying like, hey, take cover, we have an incoming attack. And every day for 6 months, it's really intense. And that takes a toll on you, especially when you have all these other issues that you haven't dealt with.
Right.
So I ended up coming back home and after my tours, and while I immediately went into therapy, part of my mind was still over there. It never came back. And I was married at the time. I have some beautiful children, but I wasn't able to be super present for them because my mind was still over there fighting that battle. I couldn't go to restaurants and be super happy and super present, with my family because I was like, okay, I have to watch all the entry and exit points. I have hypervigilance. I have
Yeah. Yeah.
anxiety. Like, couldn't go on normal dates with my wife because I couldn't, I go to a movie theater, I'm watching the exits, I'm watching the people, I have to watch everything. And it just really, I really struggled as a result. And I ended up going through divorce and kind of hitting rock bottom again. I fell into alcoholism, suicidal ideations. I wasn't sleeping. I hit rock bottom, and it was really difficult for a few years there. And I remember viscerally walking home or walking to work one morning drunk as a skunk at 3 in the morning. And as I was walking to work, I started to sober up, and I thought, if I kill myself, my daughter will never know the person that her father could be. My
Mm,
daughter will always think that suicide is an option. She will always see that the strongest person in her life chose to chose to end his life. And when you
wow.
have a little 8-year-old, like, you're their whole world. And so I made up in my mind at that moment to not be an example of what not to do, but to be an example of fighting for your dreams and giving it all you got. And so I ended up ending my contract with the military service, moving to LA, and pursuing my dream of being a broadcast television director. And now I do that. I absolutely, I've been a part of some amazing productions, some global productions, some international productions, and I am literally living my dream, and I am that example to her. And so after going through that whole life experience, now I'm like, okay, how did I do that? Because I went from such a deep low to some crazy highs, and now in my professional career, I deconstructed that using neuroscience, the power of the mind, power of positive thinking, power of how the brain works, to understand how I went from those low lows to the super high highs. And now I do motivational speeches, transformational speeches, and I work as a personal integrated growth strategist and help other people use military tactics plus neuroscience to help achieve their goals.
Yeah, I've read the Bible front to back, and I've never seen anything against chocolate. Like I said, that's pretty bad there. Yeah. My thing is, so I heard you say you were 26 over there in the war zone. Did you join when you were 26? Because I thought you
No,
ran away as soon as you were, like 18,
yes.
19.
Yes. So I ran away at the age of 18. And so there's a little more to the story. Ran away. I ended up running away from Chicago to Florida to live with my uncle. And
Mm.
so it wasn't like I was just on the road living with strangers. I
Yeah.
knew I'd already signed up for the military, so I just wanted a few months off to hang with somebody cool
Right.
before I joined the Air Force. And so I did join when I was 18, went through basic training, all that fun stuff. My first duty station was in Alaska, which was fun. But it took a few years before it became my time to go in the rotation to Iraq. So I was about 26 by the time it actually flew over.
What was the year you joined?
2003. 2003.
Okay, so it was
No,
already
it was
post
2004.
9/11.
Yes, it was post 9/11. It was, sorry, February 2004. February
Okay.
2004.
Okay. So what year was it when you went over to the war zone?
Funny story. I always have a very visceral remember of me flying over. It was election day, the day Obama got elected. I was on a flight from Norfolk, Virginia to Germany to then go to Qatar to then go to Iraq. But they woke us all up and said, hey, Obama is the next president of the United States. And everybody's like, great. Does that mean we're coming home alive? Does that mean we're coming home sooner? Like,
Yeah.
nobody cared.
Yeah, like, wait, are we turning around?
Yeah,
Sounds
exactly.
good. He has my
Right.
vote.
Exactly. It was very crazy. Like, they woke everybody up, and then we were all like, "Well, I'm gonna get some rest." Well, I still can't, so we went right back to sleep. Like a plane
Yeah.
of like 350 like military folks. It was funny.
Yeah, I think it's funny because where you flew out of Norfolk, right next to Newport News, another war zone, in my opinion. If you've ever, you know,
Oh
at
yeah.
least when I was serving, most places were banned. Almost every smoke shop was a scam or had lace stuff. The gas station outside my barracks room, they had shot a Marine 12 times just to take his wallet. They had shot several sailors. There was a story, a sailor literally dragged a sailor who was bleeding and bullet shot to the base, and the guards were like, "Whoa!" No," and he threw him across the line that says U.S. government property. So now they had to do something. He's like, "I
Oh,
just got to throw this guy across the line, and now you got to take care of him." And then like left. Like I've heard some crazy stories. Of course, all the
really?
auto places are con artists, so to speak. I had a guy get a car for like quadruple its value, and his chief went back in there with him and like shook up the sales guy and got the boss and got the car returned, luckily. But yet they armed robbery at I knew sailors who they went to go to Taco Bell on duty day to just pick up some food for some of the people stuck on the ship,
Right.
robbed at gunpoint. It's just ridiculous. So yeah, Newport News, Norfolk. You said Norfolk. I had to do my bit there, but yeah, so so you were almost halfway through your contract when
Yes.
when you got over there. So
No, when I left, I did 12 years. So,
okay, okay.
yeah,
Well, I'm
total.
saying you would have been at 8 years when you got over there because you were 26,
Yes.
correct?
Yes,
So
yes,
you
yes.
were approaching that halfway mark, and then as you're approaching halfway, which is a big deciding point, boom, all that stuff happens, and that's like, do I want to do another 10 years of this, right? That's what I'm saying. How much of an influence did that have after, because you had already been in for so long?
You know, it's such a great question because that's a lot of nuance that the civilians don't understand because they don't
Yeah,
have that frame of reference for, 20 and out or 20 in retirement. I received a lot of pressure to stay in from my supervisors to friends to coworkers. Like, man, you're already halfway there. Like, just
right.
write it out. It won't be
Like Bon
so bad.
Jovi said.
Exactly. And I struggled with it. I wrestled with it for years, but ultimately I knew that yes, I could write it out. Sure, that's an option, but would I be the version of myself? Would I be a kind of a more miserable version of myself? Would I
Mm,
be I was already when I did transition out, I was about 30 years old when I began starting over in my career in television. I was a production assistant delivering coffee to 18, 19, 20-year olds that had started earlier than I did. So I knew if I waited until I was in my 40s, then I would be that much older and that much more, not to say that it was
100%.
possible, but it would have been a larger hill to climb. So I decided I wanted to pursue my dream more than I wanted to stay in, more than I loved the military and what we were doing and, going through that whole rigmarole.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, some of my nuclear operator buddies, they want to go to college after they get out and then maybe another college. I'm like, dude, you're going to be 24 when you start college, and then you're going to go 4 years, and then you're going to go to another one, or even if you go 2 years of this, it's like it's going to be weird. They're like, college is going to be such a party. I'm like, everyone's going to call you the old man. Like, you're going to be the weird old guy talking to 19-year-old girls. Like, trust me, dude. Because he's like, I can't wait to date all these college girls. I'm like, dude, they're gonna think you're like an old guy, like, and plus they're gonna hear that you were in the military and call you baby killer and all the stuff that we have to deal with, unfortunately. But what you said is so interesting because so many people push for like, dude, you could be retired at 38. Come on, like, but to your point, okay, if I'm retired and I can't enjoy life, if I have so much messed up or I lost out on so much or I'm starting over, is it worth it? So I think that's that whole thing of people who save up, now they're retired. Oh, we can do all the traveling, but I have two bad hips, two bad knees, and two bad arms. That's just everything at that point.
Right,
So
right.
I understand your point in that degree of is early retirement worth not being able to enjoy it? And so you had to make that executive decision. For some people, it is. For some
Yes,
people who have a shore tour the entire time and never go overseas and they're just chilling in,
right.
you know,
It's
San
easy.
Diego or something, it's worth
Right.
it, right? But you had to go over there. How long, and to your degree, it was how long until I'm put back in the rotation, if at all? I could be put back in the rotation. I could re-enlist and they're like, good, now that you signed up, we're actually sending you over, the next day. That's just how it works sometimes. Re-enlistment doesn't mean you have control over what's going to happen to you. And from your perspective, you're like, hey, we're still actively in combat. Like, this is gonna, you never know how long it's gonna last. We looked at stuff like, I remember when I was, training on the submarine and at base and stuff, they had one TV in the one room, and every time we walked by, it's funny. The submarine, obviously, right? You're cut off from the world, and then even
Right.
if you're in port, so you get off the sub, you go get food in the one base, and there's no windows. It's all concrete, giant heavy metal doors. There was one TV that always had the news on, and it's like 2 a.m. in the morning where we get off the sub, we go to get a bite to eat, and we see like Russia invades Ukraine, and it's like, oh shoot. And
Yeah.
just like every day that was on the TV, and we thought to ourselves, well, maybe this will be over, by the time we're done training.
Right.
Look, where are we today? This is years ago,
Right.
So it's like you never
Oh,
know how long conflict is going to last, and that also means your life is just up for grabs to be put in that rotation. So I understand why you made the decision you made, and I mean, how long were you actively in the combat zone for?
so a total of 1 year for the Air Force. The tours are a little bit different. My ex-wife, she did 4 tours, but her tours were 3 months each. I did
Okay.
2 tours, 6 months each. So, but also to your point, my first tour was out of rotation. I actually went instead of my supervisor. And then so I was gone
Yep.
for 6 months. I came back for 6 months, and they were like, "Oh, by the way, now your tour, your rotation is up. So now you're going." So I was gone for 6 months, back for 6 months, gone for 6 months. And my daughter was 2 at the time when I left for the first one, and it broke my heart that even though we FaceTime, or it was Skype back then, we Skyped almost every day, and she did not recognize me when I got off the plane. It
Wow.
broke my heart down. And
Yeah.
like the I still struggle honestly with going back the second time, knowing that, like, okay, this is the situation I'm leaving my family in. I know, seeing friends, and I was a part of honor guard over there for a little bit, and just being privy to some of the things that were happening and seeing these coworkers and my brothers over there dying. It's like, is it worth it? Like, am I going to come back? Is it, you know, I struggled with that. I struggled with it a lot.
On the other end, did you have guilt like you're seeing the guys who are re-enlisting, you're like, man, I'm such a selfish coward almost in a degree of like these guys are going back out there and here I am leaving. Like, did you have guilt on that end? I don't want to call it survivor's guilt necessarily, but that idea of like other people are going back out there, what am I doing?
It's it was a little different for me because I did want to come home to see my family. Like, I felt like, we were all there for our time. I did my time, and now I'm ready to come home. And I will say, I did feel guilty about those that died, and if
Yeah.
they were more worthy of life than I was.
Mm.
That was something that I struggled with for years. And every now and then I still think about it, and I'm like, what why was I chosen to make it out when so many other people needlessly got killed, died for whatever reason? It's Some things just never, it's hard to shake.
Yeah, for sure. So you got out and you mentioned earlier it was a very rough transition.
Yeah.
I mean, you come home, you've got the wife and kid waiting. How long did it take until the divorce happened?
It was a few years later. We tried to make it work. I was in therapy, we went to marriage counseling, and thankfully she understood a lot of what I was experiencing because we were mill to mill. So she
Right.
was prior military service. She had her own myriad of issues, just like anybody that comes back from a war zone. But we tried to make it work, but I wasn't present. I wasn't, who she needed me to be. And not to say that I was a bad person, I just wasn't present. Like, my mind was still
I
over
get
there.
you. Yeah.
I was a recluse. Like, I didn't want to leave the comfort of my home. Like, I was playing with the kids, but I wasn't, you could still see that, like, I wasn't the same person that I was before I left. And I know so many people that resonates with, and you know, war just changes you, and there's no amount of training that can prepare you to, like, beef yourself up and
Yeah.
build that resiliency. So
It's
you're the
not
fighter.
natural. It's
Yeah.
not it's not a natural thing.
So yeah, I struggled with it for a long time.
Yeah, I get what you're saying with the mill on mill. It's a little more understanding. So you said you went straight into therapy when you got out. Was that by choice, or was that like the wife said, "Hey, you got to go to therapy," or did you actually choose that for yourself?
It was a little bit of both. So I've had family members, honestly, I've
Yeah.
had family members that were also prior military and they didn't get help. And I saw how it really seeped
Mm,
into all aspects
okay.
of their life. And so I was like, okay, if I got any shot at this, like I need to go get as much help as possible. And the wife was super supportive. You know, the and at this point, I came back in 2009, so it was starting to become more accepted in the military to go talk to therapy and things like that. But, it was definitely a process for sure.
Yeah, yeah, I get that because a lot of military guys don't see that kind of help. So I was wondering, if you chose that of your own accord or not. And like you said, 2009, now it's 2025, so quite a while later. And the promotion of those kinds of services and help, especially for military members, have definitely drastically increased since then, a lot. So hopefully people
Absolutely.
are getting the help they need. I know. I will say, as I've had plenty of experiences with the VA, some really good, some really bad. I will say they definitely do, at least from what I've seen, if you try to do some, at least what I've experienced, like the mental health stuff, like I tried setting up an appointment and, it just didn't, we were kind of playing phone tag and they
Mm,
followed up, not just with the phone, but with paper letters in the mail and everything to make sure to get it scheduled. So like I did appreciate that.
totally.
So yeah, but you mentioned, so you were going to therapy, but it kind of, so I think it's interesting. I had a vet on the show once before, and he goes to therapy, and they're like, "Tell us about your childhood." And his first thing was childhood. I just got out of the Middle East defusing bombs under sniper fire. What the hell do I care about childhood, right?
Yeah,
But he realized ultimately that there was a lot of stuff from his childhood that was impacting him. On top of it, you mentioned the religious cult upbringing and stuff like that. So was the therapy kind of how you unpack that? Because obviously you knew just from having run away from home and from what you dealt with that there was a lot of frustrations with that. But did therapy bring it forward on a new level that you were able to kind of actually deal with it?
great question. So my realizations about the cult was way more recent. It was in the past 5 years that I was like, oh, it wasn't just a quirky religion. Like it was actually a cult because they were trying to control our belief system, control, what we did and things of that nature.
Right.
So to answer your question, when I was going through therapy in the 2000s, it was more of, yes, I dealt with some childhood issues, but I still hadn't yet come to realize that it was a cult. Now, I will say
Mm.
what made help was I mean, this is weird to say, but my mother passed away, who she was a part of the cult, and my grandmother, who was my favorite person in the world, she passed away. And so I had some separation from their death
Right.
and them kind of talking about it, the religion, as like though it's normal. And I had some space to think about, like, hey, wait a minute, this wasn't normal. Maybe it was a cult. And like, I think what happened for me was when I think of cult, I think of, Waco, Texas, where there's a compound and barbed wire and they're drinking Kool-Aid and things like that.
Yeah.
But it
Yeah.
wasn't necessarily that kind of cult. It was more a cult of the mind and the belief system, where they had you drinking the Kool-Aid of such an extreme belief system that it, they controlled how you navigated in the world. And like, there's some things that are objectively good, like, you shouldn't drink, you shouldn't do drugs. Like, great, that's pretty good advice usually,
Yeah.
But so it took me a while to come to the realization that, it was of a cult and you know, it wasn't just a weird religion.
Yeah, I get that. You have that kind of bias when you're in the middle of it and experiencing all of it. Plus, you're surrounded by people who have normalized it. What I'll say is, everyone, I encourage you to listen to my episode with Tom Snow on denominations, or as he says, if you pull the letters from it and you can spell, it actually says demon in a nation. And he talked about legalism and how denominations have divided us, and that's The Devil's Plan. It's a pretty good episode. It's definitely a wake-up call. And it's so interesting having people on my show who have experienced different religious stuff. So it's kind of like your story. I had a gentleman who, what was it? They weren't allowed to play volleyball outside because it was like unholy, but they could play it inside. And it was like what God doesn't see through the roof, stuff like that. It was like you couldn't have like a certain metallic backing in the rim in like in the rims of your tires. Otherwise, something like he was naming all these like legalistic rules, right? None of this stuff was in the Bible. It was just like super legalism. And like so having people like you said with the chocolate, like that's a very oddly specific thing, right? And it's interesting, but I'll never forget I had a gentleman who was raised in Alaska, actually, surprisingly, with Jehovah's Witnesses, and they said he was asking them questions. He was saying like, but the Bible says this or this says that, and he was questioning them, and they said, "You are too smart to learn." Now, what does that mean? You're too smart to learn. You ask too many questions, right? I mean, that just sounds now you're just admitting you're a cold at that point, right? I mean, you're too smart to learn. You ask too many questions. Just accept what we tell you. Well, that doesn't
It's
really sound like, isn't that
it's
interesting?
there was certain people when I remember growing up, they would ask questions during certain parts of the service, and they would get told God would reveal that to them in time, or
Right.
to not to go there. Don't let your intellect get
Mm.
in the way. Like
Villainizing it. Right.
yes, and they
Yeah.
would be ostracized from the community, like the
Yeah.
community of church. Like they weren't like, oh, don't go talk to him because he's a troublemaker and things like that. When they're just they're trying to learn, they're trying to ask questions, or they're
Yeah.
challenging something and seeing like, hey, are we actually doing this in accordance to whatever belief system?
Yeah. I think the most interesting one that caught me off guard was a gentleman who let this quote when he was stationed in Hawaii. They kind of got a part of it. And basically, they had said, to summarize it very quickly, Jesus came to condemn the white man and to free all minorities, and that Jesus was only for colored people. And I found that to be a very interesting take. And I believe their justification for it too was they leveraged the dream that Peter had, where he has the curtain come down with all the clean and unclean animals interacting. And the guy told me, like, they said that all the unclean animals were minorities, and that Jesus said, "Do not call unclean what I have called clean," and that he had come to free all colored people and to condemn and like destroy white people. And I was like, that's a very interesting take on the Bible and religion. That's actually that one I haven't heard. That's just completely different. I don't even know how you
Right.
got that.
Did you get A to Q? Like what?
I
How did we get?
know, I know. I was like, that's interesting, but he
Wow.
said he left that because I guess they had pressured him because they were like, "Well, aren't you a black man? And oh, so you're against the brothers? You don't stand with the brothers?" They kind of did that group mentality of like, hey, if you're not for us, you're against us kind of thing. And it was like, we can't just agree to disagree. It's like, you're a false black person. And, he was a young military guy stationed in Hawaii. And they obviously, like most cults or religious groups that are, legalistic, they did do a few things. They villainize stuff, right? They outcast you, or they kind of have all these big promises that are very like speaks to your heart, in some kind of way. So, I think it's interesting, but you escaped all of that, obviously, and you know, you went into the military. We talked about that. We talked about, the recovery. I think your story about the suicidal ideation the second time with your daughter was very powerful, but it speaks to a very certain niche. So when I was working on my memoir originally, I had titled it "Who Would Miss Me?" because that was the number one question that suicidal people say. That's the number one thing they say, "Who would miss me?" Right? People, it doesn't matter. You look at the military, for example. People ask me when I guest on shows, Mr. Whiskey, is there a pattern? Is there something we can use here? I said, look, I'll tell you the pattern that there is none. Chief, officer, senior chief, or sergeant, drill sergeant, grunt, enlisted, black, white, Hispanic, married, single, kids, it didn't matter. Suicide doesn't discriminate like that, right? Because it's all about that person feeling isolated. It doesn't matter if it's a person who lives by themselves or a person who lives with eight family members. It's that internal isolation. So in your case, you had an anchor. And I think that's so important, but a lot of us don't have that anchor. So what would you say to all the people who don't have a daughter who say, if I kill myself, it's not going to matter to anyone. It's not going to impact or influence anyone. Now, we know that's not true. If you
Right.
look at the statistics of how many people are affected by a single suicide, it's a lot. But what could you say to the people who aren't a father, who don't have a daughter or a son or someone looking up to them? What would be their reason?
I know it's hard to fathom when you're in that really low place. And you have to give yourself a lot of space and grace and patience and self love, which is really hard to do when you're that deep, when you're that low. But I think it's important to realize that even though you might not see them, there's still people out there that need you. And even because you've gone through this low, this really dark place, this hell, that your story, what you've been through, what you're going through, is going to save someone's life. Regardless of if you can see it now, we've all gone through hard things, but if you can just get through it, you can help someone else feel like they're not alone, like their life is valuable. And sometimes what I've come to find with a lot of folks is yes, we are thinking about, who's going to miss me and, the right here, right now of it. Like, how can I get this pain to end? Which is primarily from a lot of the folks that I'd speak to about it. They're like, the pain is just so overwhelming. And suicide, unfortunately, feels like the quickest, expressway or exit route off the expressway, for lack of a better term. But understanding Tom Hanks has such a great quote. He's doing a roundtable with like De Niro and a bunch of folks. And he says, this too shall pass. You're living your dreams, the top of the heights, this too shall pass. If you're at the bottom of the barrel and you're in the dumps and like, everybody's forsaken you, your parents, your supervisors, your friends, like this too shall pass. I say to those folks, get through it and get some help, find a support system, because there are people out there that love you that maybe they just can't articulate it right now. And I would also say, I heard this once and it completely changed my life. Think of life as a slingshot. When you go through adversity, like I went through the childhood cult, that slingshot pulled it back a little bit. When I went to Iraq and experienced some of the things and the mental struggles that I experienced there, the slingshot went back a little bit further. When I went through another bout of suicidal ideations, the slingshot went back a little bit further. But when you make it through, that ball bearing or that projectile, whatever's being released in that slingshot, will go so much further and touch so many more people as a result of the trash that you've been through in life. Your reach is so much further because you can relate to more people. Those that haven't been through anything can't relate to people.
I agree 100%. That's what has made me a capable host. That, the authority I have is from lived experience. And I am grateful for what I've been through, for the ability to connect with others. And Ryan Penley, when he came on the show, great guy, Next Fix podcast host for addiction, he said the same thing. He was upset that his rock bottoms, it wasn't one DUI, it wasn't two DUIs, it wasn't, it was multiple warrants out for his arrest, right? But he described it as similar to what you said, a bow and arrow. He said, but I kept going, pulled back further and further, and I shot forward so much so, so I agree. And this too shall pass. I'm gonna say it kind of goes with what I was about to say, which is Douglas Brinker, two-time suicide survivor and vet. He was on my show twice now. Amazing gentleman doing a ton of work in suicide prevention for veterans specifically. And what he said, I love the way he said it. He said, suicide is a permanent solution for a temporary problem. Amen. That's all that has to be said. When he said that, a chill went down me. Like you said, it's hard to see that as temporary when you're in it. Trust me, when I was in the military on the worst days, and people were like, it's just a few more months. Like, that's nothing. Like, you're so young, you're or was I was like, 20, 21, 22, you're going to look back and this is going to be a blink. And, now I'm at that point where I do look back, I'll be approaching in a couple months here, the time that will be equivalent to the time I was in equals the time I've been out. And like that kind of like irks me, like what? Like, but it has gone fast. And, you know,
That's
time is
awesome.
weird like that. I'm sure you look back, you're like, man, that time I spent in that war zone, it was just a little fraction of my life. But sometimes when you're there, you're like, it's eternity. So I get it, but I really want people to think it's a permanent solution to a temporary problem. You can't take it back. It is permanent, right? So I like to say, as long as you're still breathing, you have hope, you have opportunity for something to change, right? So I think as long as you're still alive, yes, it can get worse or it can get better, but once you're gone, there's no better, there's no worse, there's nothing. So I think you should try to pursue change and opportunity while still alive. So you got through that time period, like you said, and then you pursued what you wanted to do. You finally got to pursue your dream with working in the media industry. So tell us about that and what you're doing nowadays.
Yeah. I mean, man, whew, Mr. Whiskey, when I tell you I'm living my dream, I am truly living the dream. When I look back at little Logan, growing up in Chicago, going through all the garbage that he went through, I would have never thought that I would be, leading some amazing teams on some amazing broadcasts. So I direct sports and sports highlight shows. I also do concerts, corporate events, fashion shows, things of that nature for broadcast and streaming services. So basically, I am calling cameras, I'm directing cameras on what to shoot, where you go as a viewer on your journey when we cover the event, whether it's a tight shot of the athlete, whether they're, bouncing the ball, or whether it's a wide shot and you can see the whole arena or venue, or, when we go to replay and things of that nature. So that is what I do. I've been a part of a couple World Series and a Super Bowl. I've directed, French Open multiple times, the Aussie Open, been a part of the US Open multiple times. So I've had the privilege of working on some amazing
Yeah,
productions with some amazing groups of people. I love concerts, having that creative outlet and being able to tell stories with cameras. I do that part-time now, as well as speak to folks and just having, panel discussions and conversations like we're having about, mental health and suicidal
for
awareness,
sure.
and, giving back to the community, because that's at least where I am right now in life. That's super important to me, giving back and making sure that other people feel like they're not alone. And if they need a friend to talk to for a couple minutes, after I give a speech and they're like, hey, you know, I've been feeling really weird, like I'm just ready to punch out right now. But hearing your story makes me feel like I've got a little something to fight for. Come on, let's sit down, let's talk, let's grab a cup of, tea or coffee or something. For me, that's what life is about right now.
100%. But you need to get ready for those LA Olympics. You better be over there, with the camera. You better be getting all the shots.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, man, everybody's gearing up. The entire city. It's going to be a blast.
Yeah, it's gonna be that's gonna be a busy day. I can imagine. LA already has so many people. Now you want to throw the Olympics there? Come on. That's a
It,
lot. But I
the
gotta
city's
say,
going to explode. It's going to explode. Like, I don't
yeah.
understand how
Yeah,
we
I know. It's
that international community, and along with,
hey,
I
that's
actually know
a
a lot
I
of
went
people that
to
are
that
leaving.
airport once. It's already such a big airport. It's got like so many separate things. I can imagine the traffic.
Yeah,
I didn't drive. I had people drive me when I was there, but man, I was like, this is terrible. How are you gonna add to this?
it's tough. It's really tough. Like, in terms of the traffic, cost of living, it's not worth it to me.
Yeah, no, I get that. And you mentioned specifically sports highlights and sports moments. So I'm not really a big sports guy, but for everyone listening, you got some favorite teams you want to put out there so they can discredit everything you've said so far. They're like, wait, this guy's, a fan of XYZ. Forget everything he said. You know?
Well, the funny thing is, I've kind of, over the years of working in sports, I used to be a diehard Cubs fan. I grew up in Chicago.
Yeah, I
Uh,
figured. Yeah.
But over time in sports, I'm kind of over a lot of sports.
I get
I've
what you're saying.
After some of my experiences and working some really long games, and I'm like, okay, I still to this day wholeheartedly love the production side of it. But sports, after watching so many, hundreds of Lakers and Dodgers and Clippers and Kings and Ducks games, literally hundreds, I'm like, sports is cool. I love the production side, but like I'm kind of over a lot of
Has it
sports. So I
become
don't actually watch
just
sports.
mundane? Like it's the same once you've seen enough, you've seen them all kind of mentality?
I wouldn't say that because crazy things do happen, but it's more of a, for me, it's lost its mystique. It's lost the,
Yeah.
because I've seen so many games and been a part of so many productions, like you still don't know what's going to happen. You still don't know, if there's going to be a crazy fan or if there's going to be a fight breakout or, so you still have to be on your toes present in the moment. But
Yeah.
I think sports for me in general has lost some of its mystique.
I get what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, are you looking at eventually going into like producing your own movie or TV series or any of that kind of work?
Not really. So I love the live environment, and where, everything is on the line and there's no chance in going back and doing pickups and fixing it in edits. That really appeals to me. And it's always kind of, even as in high school, I was a part of like one of the few things I was allowed to do was be a part of the technical theater club. So I was like working on the lights and the audio engineering board and things like that.
Right.
And in theater, and I thought it was pretty cool. So I've always fell in love with the live element. There's some projects that I'm in the works on that can't be spoken about right now, but they're all in the live environment. I'm not looking to do anything in the film. Besides, my skill set kind of doesn't relate because in the live environment versus film, it's two different, completely sets of
Yeah.
equipment, two skill sets, very different.
So you that adrenaline rush, like this is our one chance to get the shot down. Go.
Love it. Love it. Wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah. And then we're gonna have your website in the description below. Who should really check it out? It's mainly a way to contact you, correct? Just to connect further.
Yes. Anyone that, hey, if you need a friend, if you need a personal strategist that will help you. So in my strategy sessions, for those that are maybe feeling a little stuck in life, like you're maybe in your comfort zone, maybe you're in a phase of life and you're trying to figure out how to career pivot. I use military tactics, military strategy that's allow the military to sustain a 90 to 95% success rating for its missions. I use those same tactics plus proven neuroscience, how the brain works, how the brain functions to help you get to your goals. So I'm a big proponent of, building up that mental resilience, building up that self discipline, and putting in guardrails and philosophies in your life according to what you need so you can be more effective in 90 days than you've been in the past 3 years.
Yeah, so ladies and gentlemen, be sure to check that in the description below. Or if your kid has a basketball game coming up and you want some of those special camera angles, Logan's your guy. No, I'm just
Hit
kidding,
me.
but
Hit me. I'm
yeah.
there.
And yeah, but like you said, I appreciate you coming on the show and talking about this stuff. I think it's important to, and I want people to take away, this isn't just a military veteran story, right? This is a human story. This is about whatever you've been through, whatever your quote war zone is that because there are a lot of people I know, they're out on a date with their wife or husband or whatever it may be, and they're in the office in their mind, they're taking care of this and that, right? We all have it to a different degree. I think your story comes down to being present, living and being there for others and serving. So I appreciate you coming on the show today and, sharing that story, and I hope it resonates with people. And again, thank you for your service to this country as well.
Same to you, brother. I really appreciate you. And the fact that you're not just sitting back with your story and you're giving back to the community, you're helping other people move forward in their life. That means the world to me. And I know it means the world to your audience.
sailing through the ocean blue. Nuclear reactors, my crew, guiding the ship. The stars as our guide, through the waves we ride. Jokes and laughter fill the air. On this voyage we have to share, working together, side by side. As one family we will abide. In the heart of the ship we reside, nuclear operators with pride, powering the vessel with every stride. Our mission, a source of great pride.